Evening and welcome to the August meeting of the Borough Council of the Borough of Gettysburg. At Hall, please rise for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening and thank you for joining us. If you did not, please do sign in at the podium, especially if you're making public comment this evening. I would note that our second Community Development Block Grant hearing will be held on August 28th at 6:30 p.m. That is 30 minutes prior to our scheduled work session that evening. And that'll be an opportunity for the staff to offer their proposal for the use of those funds and also for additional public comment on the use of those funds. An executive session of the Borough Council, the Borough of Gettysburg, will be conducted immediately following the adjournment of this evening's monthly general business meeting, consistent with Section 708A1 and Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act for the following purposes. 1, to provide information and discuss matters involving the employment, the terms and conditions of employment, the salary and benefits of administrative borough employees, and the investigation of complaints involving current borough employees. And 2, to review and discuss matters of borough business which, if conducted in public, could lead to the disclosure of information and matters of confidentiality protected by law. All right, you all have the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion to approve the August 14th, 2023 agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any questions or comments about the agenda this evening? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that takes us to the approval of the minutes for the council meeting on July 10th, the CDBG hearing, and the council work session on July 24th.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any amendments or corrections to those minutes? Any of those minutes? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have our minutes. That'll take us to public comment. Please note this first public comment session is for items that appear on the agenda this evening. Please use the podium, state your name and address. So, Mr. Hodges, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Brian Hodges, 137 Ridge Avenue here in Gettysburg. On the agenda tonight is a motion to appoint Mr. Andrew Johnson onto the HARB board, replacing Mr. Justin Hartman, and then finishing out Mr. Hartman's term until August of 2026. And I have to admit that me and some of the other folks that I talked to did not know there was an open board position on HARB. I talked to quite a few people and nobody seemed to know that that was happening, and then tonight we see this opening being filled. So I did a little research and found out that Justin Hartman actually resigned on March 16th at a HARB meeting, I believe, which is almost exactly 5 months ago. So that position has been open for 5 months. So I'd like to also state that I know volunteer positions here on these boards, commissions, authorities are very hard to fill. It's hard to find people interested or knowledgeable about wanting to commit their time to these positions. But what I want to do is ask how this particular vacancy was filled. Was this position listed or advertised on the borough website or in the Gettysburg Times? Because I, again, the last 5 months did not know there was an open position. Did the borough just wait for an applicant? I know in the past, citizens could volunteer, fill an application, turn it into Ms. Stahl, and then they just sit there in limbo until an open position became available. And actually on the borough website, Mr. Hartman is still listed as a HARB member. So he's not like crossed out, X'd out, like we have an open position. And since I've been attending most council meetings here in the last few months, I don't believe this opening was ever mentioned by Borough Council or by the Harbor Director there, Ms. Deb English. So we're kind of out in the dark on that. Another question I'd like to ask is who's in charge of finding volunteers? Is it still just the application process? Do any council members go out and seek people to fill the volunteer positions? I think back in the past, back in the committee days, there was a committee that got together, bipartisan, that searched out volunteers and said, hey, would you be interested in filling one of these positions when they became available? And you actually, guys, this committee, this council did that with the Human Relations Commission. You had a little committee, you met some volunteers, and then appointed them to the commission. Also, I'm not here to diminish the qualifications of Andrew Johnson. I don't know him personally. He may be the perfect candidate, but how he's picked to be I just want to know how he's picked to be in this position. How was he picked to be appointed? Did he submit the only application in the last 5 months to Sarah Stahl? Is there like none on file, like zero? Was he approached by anybody on Borough Council to be on HARB? Was he approached by Ms. English to be on council or on the board? So what I'm asking somebody, or Mr. Heyser, President Heyser, can you explain the process of how this happens before the actual vote tonight? Just let the public know this is the process we went through. There's no applicants. He was the only one. We searched him out. Why was it not advertised? So just for the sake of transparency, like how did this come about? And then my last statement would be if this position was never advertised publicly by the borough, I would ask this vote to be tabled until the next business meeting, 1 month, to have the opportunity for other applicants to possibly say, I'm interested in volunteering for HARB or another position here in the borough. And then next month, if there's multiple people, they could come state their case in front of you. You can pick the one you want. Or if there's none again, you can pick Mr. Johnson, just like tonight. But that's really kind of what I'm asking. Okay? So thank you for listening to me. Okay?
Public comment? All right, seeing no additional public comment, we'll go on to current and old
President
business.
Heyser, I think
Yes.
there was somebody raising their hand.
I was just asking a procedural question. Does
Oh,
the
please.
parking, item C, parking department, is this appropriate to talk about that now, or do we wait till the end?
You could comment on that now. Yes, you could if you have a parking related item.
Judy McGee, 256 Baltimore Street. I'm in Gettysburg. I wanted to talk about the pilot bus parking. The Baltimore Street space is right outside my front. And I'd like council and town, there is no easy way to fix this. And there is no perfect solution. For those of you unfamiliar with Baltimore Street, it's narrow, there's buildings, we're side by side, and when a bus takes 3 spaces, it sits there and it idles, which it then belches soot and smoke. And there is a 5-minute ordinance, but it's never enforced. The only way it gets to be enforced, because you've only got 2 guys to be in 12 places at once, understood? The only way to shut them down is to go knock on the window and talk to the driver. Sometimes they're really good guys, and sometimes they're not as good guys. The behavior of several buses, we fought this battle for 28 years. This is about the 4th or 5th round. And those of you who've been around, sorry, Jude, John and I love this, but we need to decide, what is Gettysburg going to be? Are we going to be a historic town that is pedestrian-based, that is bicycle-based, or are we going to be a commercial community that caters to big buses? Is there a reason why we can't offload around the corner, let people walk a block? It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better than having a bunch of buses sitting idle in front of my house. We've had planters stolen. We've had people peeing in my planters. I have had human excrement in our side gate because the buses sit there, they park, and the kids go off and do whatever they do, and they come back and they've had nowhere to go to the bathroom. I have a great privacy fence. That works when you're a kid. Had a kid fall off my porch, jump off my porch, smash his face, and got letters from mom's lawyer that they were going to sue us for personal bodily injury. The kids aren't supervised, the buses stink. We just put $6,000 into a new front facade on our house. Part in part because of the soot, the ashes, the stink. Y'all expect us to preserve and protect and restore historic buildings to the standard for the Department of Interior's restoration. And then you park buses that sit out there and idle and stink and deteriorate and cause damage. Who are we? Who are we going to be? I love Linda to death. I do. But we're all in just the same boat, and it's mud, and we've just got to do something. Everybody's going to have to give something in order to get something. And I have had this discussion with several of you, and with Charles as well. Nancy, if we could take the Shriver House model of bus controls, there would never be another word about buses in this town. She's fabulous. She sends out written instructions and she enforces them. She meets every single bus and she talks to the driver and she watches what goes on with those kids. Love Nancy to death. Now we have bus parking on both sides of the street. We're back where we were in 1996 or 7 or 8 with ghost tours. You get buses on both sides of the street. Thankfully, they're in front of Nancy's. Nancy will take care of her own. But what do we do about the rest of town? And where do we put them? And how do we get help as the property owners? Because I get no benefit from the buses. They cost me, most recently, $6,000. This summer, I'm putting another $6,000 into repointing the foundation on my home. Y'all aren't going to help me with that. I'm not getting any revenue. Nobody pays me to park out front of my house. They spend money at the restaurants, they spend money at the hotels, they pay pillow tax. How much does Gettysburg get of the pillow tax? And Destination Gettysburg brings more buses. They also get the biggest chunk of the pillow tax. Is there a reason they can't ante up and kick in and help us out with some of this problem? They communicate with those bus companies. They could be doing Nancy's letter if she would. I don't know what her opinion is at. Those are my words, not hers. But when they're doing bus reservations, couldn't Destination Gettysburg send out the letter with the reservation that says, oh, by the way, we have conduct expectations in our town, and it does not include idling, and it does not include pooping in people's yards, and it does not include peeing on their flowers, or stealing their flowers, or using their flowers as trash cans. My 2 cents as a property owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Public comment. Yes, ma'am.
Sharon Michaels, 120 York Street, and I'd like to speak on the same topic. I echo everything that Judy has said in terms of the problems when buses are idling in front of our home. For us, because we sit close to the street, it's almost like they're in the same room with us. Kids are sitting, not only kids, but adults are sitting on the porch. They leave garbage. There's garbage on the steps. I think I sent an email out to all of you. I don't know. I only heard back from Mr. Heyser on it. But things, again, stolen off our porch. But biggest concern to me is the pollution that's coming from the buses, because they do idle and they will idle. There's no way to keep them from idling. They need heat in the winter. The driver sits in the bus. They rarely go anywhere, and they need heat in the winter and they need air in the summer. So they keep those buses running. The pollution that's created from those buses running comes right down our narrow alleys there on York Street, and probably in other areas also. And I'm sitting on my back porch. I can tell you when there is a bus parked in front of my house, even when I'm in my yard doing yard work. Not to, and again, to echo the concerns about the upkeep on properties. I think we've lived in our house over 20 years, and we're like on the 4th repainting of it, and it still looks like crap. Can't keep any paint on it because of the pollution and the dirt and stuff that comes in off the street. So having the buses just adds to that. And I am really concerned about the level of pollution that's occurring in the downtown area, with not only the increases in traffic over those 20 years, but the bus traffic. There are a lot of kids living downtown. There are a lot of elderly living downtown. So, you know, if we want to have a vibrant downtown that includes people, homeowners downtown, to keep that mix, then I think, you know, residents need to be, the quality of life for residents really needs to be considered. And for those of you making decisions that don't actually live in these areas, you know, talk to some folks. Hopefully more people will come here. I know some of my neighbors are very concerned about it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Public comment. All right, seeing no additional public comment, we will move on to current and old business. We start with our Department of Planning, Zoning, and Code Enforcement. Mr. Gable.
Yeah, Director Marshall is on vacation today. Just a couple updates from the Planning Department. The Rezoning Staff Advisory Group met for their 4th meeting recently. Just a public note that the rezoning effort will be a standing agenda item on the Planning Commission's meeting. So if you're interested in that topic, feel free to join the Planning Commission at their regularly scheduled meetings. Online permitting went live for 3 permits: yard sale permits, solicitation licenses, and transient retail permits. That's an effort to streamline processes when you're looking for permits, and it's staff's goal to get as many permits online as possible. And in the last month, there were 121 permits and licenses issued of various types. So the borough remains quite busy.
Okay, any questions related to planning or zoning? We'll do our best to address. All right, if not, we're going on to historic environmental preservation. Ms. English?
Thank you. We do have a motion on the agenda in regards to the Arts Council, and I did pass out a little rendering of the color schema that they have proposed. It originally was a darker top at the board and batten and a lighter brick, and Herb kind of suggested or requested to have those colors kind of switched and have a lighter color at the top. So that is the example of the original proposal and the new proposal for the motion, because it was not 100% clear. I know there are some representatives here that may be able to answer some additional questions. We did receive another grant from Adams County Community Foundation, Healthy Adams County, in the amount of $2,200 for the Gettysburg Stormwater Authority for public outreach and rain barrel distribution. So we will be holding another class and distributing some free rain barrels. If anyone would like to sign up, they can contact me. And we will also be at Gettysburg College on August 24th from 1 to 3 for their sustainability workshop with the students to talk about our rain barrels and best management practices. If you have any other questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Butterfield.
I spoke with Deborah about this earlier today, about some of my concerns. My question is, the package of applications that is very extensive this month, and I commend you, Deborah, on keeping them all straight and presenting them clearly. What if we disagree with one of those? Is it a package deal? If we disagree with one, do we vote no for all?
Are you talking about the motion itself?
We can certainly carve one out if you desire to. Is there one you would desire to carve out this evening?
The Arts Council application, I was uncomfortable that it just indicated that the color be lightened. If you look on the applications, one of the first ones is specific. That application, it says, make the color muted gray. With the Arts Council one, it just says lighten it. Light yellow, light pink. If we vote yes, are we giving this blanket approval? Who decides what is light enough and what isn't? So those were my concerns, and I certainly want what's best for the Arts Council. I hope they know that. But in this particular wording of this particular motion, I don't think it's specific enough.
And HARB does not regulate color. We aren't able to do that, but we can request or recommend color changes. So that's one reason they may not have had a specific, they just wanted the front facade lighter.
So that can be done. If we voted for this tonight, then it can be amended, changed, twerked.
Or you could, I mean, I know they have some color charts, and it was something of a light, I don't know if it was a lighter gray or tan.
Would you
because
be
the
more?
original color was dark.
Would you be more comfortable if the phrasing referred to the submission dated July 21st, which is the same as what you have in front of you in print?
Yes.
So if I rephrase that to say that,
Say a lighter stone as depicted in the submission.
because it's
dated-
no longer pending, right? We have this was written up.
Right, correct.
Before a product was finalized. So we could say on the application dated June 16th, 2023, and updated on July 21st, 2023. Would that satisfy your concerns?
That would be better.
Okay.
On the page showing the colors and the stone, what is the gray going to, the ash gray?
That is the metal siding color. So we originally submitted for the metal siding to be a charcoal gray, which was the darker rendering in the bottom corner. And then during our conversations, when they had talked about it wanting to be lighter, this ash gray was the color that they were okay with.
They being HARB.
Just to be clear, they have to be okay with everything in terms of color. Mrs. English is exactly correct. But they encourage you to go with something lighter. Am I phrasing that kind of appropriately, right? Like they can offer you input, but at the end of the day, when it comes to color, as you might notice a house on York Street painted purple many, many years ago, you can do whatever you like. Just to be clear on that.
So they've approved the design.
The motion we have, we actually approve the design here, and the motion, as I would rephrase it, would reflect what you have submitted here in your last submission, if that is okay.
There's been banter off the record since the meeting that having been able to percolate on both colors, that some people wished they could have reconsidered the darker color. So we need to get as much approved as we possibly can this evening so that we can start construction because our building is falling apart.
That's my concern, is I know that you have to get moving because there are issues with the building.
So I suppose my question then would be, if we move forward with the proposal in front of you and HARB submitted hypothetically another color, is that something that you're saying we have some say over adjusting color?
If they were to contact you and suggest that perhaps maybe this was not the best course of action, good heavens, well, here's where I'm at. In theory, really, not even just in theory, in practice, how that law is written is that we should be approving the material. Okay? Now, I think it's kind of like a matter of courtesy, or just so that the public has an idea of, hey, what's about to happen, and the council as well, that often, right, if you're going to present, say, like a stone, we'll get, oh, well, this is the color we're going to use. But in a really practical sense, we don't actually have control of that.
I guess to make it clear, our preference was the darker, and I will tell
Okay.
you why. It was because we don't have a full-time maintenance staff. And
Okay.
to keep the cleanliness of the building and the upkeep, it will be minimal with a darker color versus the lighter colors. That was the whole,
That was
that's the whole purpose of doing the darker, and the design by here and here. I guess that's the bottom line.
I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think we can approve materials, Adam, and we can amend that motion, and it's really, I think that we're approving essentially the materials. That's how I have always viewed how HARB is done, and I know that often it does specify, but if anybody feels differently, please let me know. But the reality is, like in a shingle pattern, right, we're going to approve you to put an asphalt shingle on, but in all reality, if you choose to put a dark brown versus a dark gray, there's not really much we can do about that, no matter what we may think about it.
I think you actually have it exactly right, and I would cite as an example on York Street the historic brick house that is a hideous purple. Painting it was compliant with HARB, but I think the color was chosen sort of in protest of HARB. I'm not sure.
I feel pretty confident that it was done so,
Yeah,
to agitate.
by some agitator. I would say that we don't really have the ability to govern that color.
So what I'd like to do is I'll phrase this motion, I'll frame it out. I also want to add the address for one of the projects because it's not on there.
Oh.
The one on Breckenridge Street. So let me read the motion and then someone can make that and then we can have additional discussion as needed. Motion to accept the recommendations of the Borough of Gettysburg Historic Architectural Review Board, HARB, following its review on July 19th, 2023, and grant certificates of appropriateness for the following applications as presented. COA-230040, major project, 33 West Middle Street, GSC Homes, proposed rear porch reconstruction, per application dated May 4th, 2023. COA 230054, major project, 29 West Middle Street, GCS Homes, for the proposed reconstruction of the east-facing porch, replicating a traditional profile per the application dated July 11th, 2023. COA 230048, major project, 51 East Stevens Street, Orchard County Realty, LLC, for the rear siding replacement using white vinyl siding per the application dated May 23rd, 2023. COA-230046, major project. Ms. Stahl, here's where I would insert the address, which is 37 Breckenridge Street. Nolan Peterson, for the proposed exterior renovations, most of which are in kind except for the slightly different profile, using 5V crimped metal for the roof, and to consider preserving any original materials beneath the existing siding per the application dated May 3rd, 2023. COA 230028, major project, 147 West Middle Street, Patrick Lukenbaugh, for the installation of a 5V crimped metal roof in a muted gray color and for the restoration, repointing, and capping off at the top of the chimney per the application dated June 15th, 2023. COA 230049, major project, 125 South Washington Street, for the proposed restoration facade design of the Adams County Arts Council building as submitted on the application June 16th, 2023. And Ms. Stahl, here's where I'm going to vary. And as updated on July 21st, 2023. And I'm going to add to that for a front facade depicting stone, comma, board and batten, comma, and matching trim work. Okay, can I have someone make that motion, please?
So moved as amended.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Not just the Arts Council building, but are there any comments or questions about any of the applications for this month?
I'll just comment, I think that this is beautiful, especially the windows at the bottom exterior to actually be able to show artwork from the outside. Wonderful. Absolutely.
Are there other questions or comments?
Yes, I know it seems like I'm nitpicking, but it's an important building. It's a large building for that street. Someone told me once Washington Street is the most traveled street in the borough. I don't know if that's true, but someone told me that. So that's why my questions. The gray in the center of the picture is the gray you indicate there.
The gray, which,
need is not.
No, that's the lighter.
No, that was
ash
the
gray.
lighter version. So this piece right here is the original gray. That's
The
on
original.
the small image down in the corner, which was the original darker version.
Okay, and the two brown on the
Those
side.
are paint colors that accent that gray for some of the existing entrance drive-it pieces that are remaining. So that's just paint.
And the barn red is not,
That is actually a picture of that metal board and batten installed on a barn.
I see, but the color has nothing
No,
to do with
it was just a
that.
representation of what it looks like once it's installed.
And one last point, will the roof of the cupola be orange as it
That
is?
is staying as is, and it's an existing red color.
You think it's red?
It's faded red.
Okay.
And I know, sorry, and I noticed, at least in these drawings, at least 5, maybe 6 exterior lights
Yes.
on the side of the building.
Yep.
Which not only is for the artwork, but also for lighting, that's true.
Absolutely, yep, and they're existing now, we're just replacing them with updated LED version.
Perfect.
All right, any other questions or comments? I would comment that, every month when we look at these certificate of appropriateness applications, it is always nice to see people that are really trying to do their best to preserve and enhance buildings that are in the historic district. So thank you to you, but also to, of course, everyone who's doing this. All right, seeing no additional comment, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, are there any further questions for Ms. English this evening? All right, if not, we go on to parking. Ms. Fissel.
Good evening. You have my report. I have the comparisons there from last year to this year. I'd also like to note the oversized vehicle parking signs were placed. We do have a new part-time parking enforcement officer. And RPP renewals are due August 31st. So the letters went out, the emails went out. People have been renewing, but they are due August. The new one starts September 1st. When you voted on the pilot plan for the oversized vehicle, I said that I would keep track of calls. I have a log up in the office that when the officers go by those spaces, if there's vehicles in them, they do note times, what kind of vehicles, if they were paid, if they were ticketed. So we do have an ongoing list. It's just when they happen to walk by. And I do have the transactions from the pay-by-phone. There has been a total of, just since the signs were installed, so I ran the report from 7/26 to August 12th. There's been a total of $108.75 paid at only those oversized vehicle spaces. There was at least one bus and one truck, oversized truck, parked at those meters. There was 3 vehicles that were unloading children that were not ticketed. There were 5 cars, other places that were parked, and they were either ticketed or issued a warning. I did have one call from a local bus company, excited about the pilot program, and wondering, when they could start parking and things like that. All the details of the space they wanted to know. So they were excited that they actually have somewhere that they can park. I did have one call from a camper. It was a truck towing a camper, and I had a call from a truck towing a U-Haul trailer asking about parking. So,
To be clear, all of those funds are collected digitally, right? There are no
Yes.
meters involved. So that $108 is,
all of them.
that's everything.
Yeah.
Is that split out by space, or is it
No.
all under the same?
All under the same.
All under the same.
It's a zone that
I understand.
It gives you the rate, the hours, everything like that. So it's all of 9 spaces.
Okay. All right. Questions for Ms. Fissel?
What, could you repeat those last 2 that you had calls about a U-Haul truck and something else?
One was it was like an SUV hauling a U-Haul trailer, he said, and the other was a truck with a camper.
And the answer was no.
No, the answer was they can park in the oversized vehicle spaces.
The oversized vehicle space, because we didn't specify that it's for buses?
Yeah, it's not a bus space, it's an oversized vehicle space. So on the sign, it says it's a 20-foot minimum. So if you have a 24-foot truck, you can park it there, because our parking spaces are only between 18 and 20 feet long. So if you have a truck and a trailer, you're taking up 2 to 3 spaces depending on how long your trailer is.
I just felt that maybe I understood this discussion to be about buses, not those two things.
I think that the discussion did focus around buses.
I don't remember anything else being discussed. Just a point of order there, that
I hear you.
I don't remember anything else being discussed. I understand that that's how we worded it, oversized vehicle parking, but nothing was discussed but buses for this pilot program.
I hear you.
I gave you the sign that said 20-foot
So-
minimum, but, I mean, anything over 20 feet is 20 feet.
I mean, I understand that. I'm not saying you're not, please don't misunderstand me
Yeah.
and my passion toward this. My point is that we did not discuss any other kind of vehicle but a bus. The measurement of said vehicle is a different thing, but we did not discuss any other kind of vehicle or any vehicle carrying or towing a vehicle. It's very different.
I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Carr here. I don't think we necessarily intended to
that.
create downtown parking for RVs. I think we were
No.
trying to alleviate a traffic problem that centered around tour buses.
Correct.
I mean, we have at least seven campgrounds in the area that I'm aware of, that I get calls at least once a week when these campgrounds are open, asking where to park. So previously, I've had to say, call private places on your own, figure it out. Now I can give them an option. And the one just this week was very appreciative. She said my husband couldn't get in anywhere else. So that was the camper. That was
Sure.
the truck towing the camper.
I mean, I guess that information would have been very nice to hear during all of this discussion about buses and a pilot program for buses. But I never heard anything like that.
Yeah, I think the issue would be, if we find that these spaces are full of vehicles that aren't buses, and then we have the tour buses showing up, and the spaces are taken by things the pilot program was not intended for, that would be problematic. We would not have actually solved a problem at all.
I agree.
Okay.
So it is a pilot program. We can do what we will with it at any time.
I believe that to be the case. I noticed that there was additional signage added on York Street, because if you park on York Street in the morning, the way that the lines were painted over, it's black paint on a black surface, but the sun rises in the east, you're looking east. It certainly looks like the parking spaces are still there. So the ADA had an extra sign to tell people to keep moving forward, but I suspect those spaces that I requested in our discussion, probably not the wisest to carve out, because there's people carrying bucket seats with infants in. They were marked off in this way, but I suspect that's where a lot of your people being spotted doing drop-offs of children is, right in front of that daycare.
The 3 were, the other 5 weren't.
Okay. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to watch in the morning.
And I'm not saying that those folks that may, yes, of course, there's a lot of campgrounds around here, but I didn't receive emails and personal phone calls on my council phone and my council email and personal interaction with constituents about that. I received feedback and lots of discussion about buses that are coming to town for our restaurants specifically, and touring, and that's what the main discussion was about. So I don't mean, please don't feel that this is me coming down on staff. It's not you're doing your job. That's not, I think it was just a misunderstanding about maybe what, at least on my part, I thought we were talking about buses. So it is a pilot program. It can be, we can do with what we will at any time. Do we need to fix that wording now and make a new motion and fix that?
I'm just pulling the motion up here from last month.
Top of page 4.
Yeah. I mean, I'm if there's any question, I agree with
I just
the
don't
sentiment completely
feel
because
that's what we, not only did we not discuss that at all, it never came up.
I know that that's
But and had it prior, that would have been part of the discussion, and I don't know if the vote would have gone the same way, but I don't believe it.
no,
How do we fix
I
that?
think I know exactly where you're at, right? It's the entire discussion, whether you were in favor of or against it, centered completely and solely around buses.
Correct.
And we have a motion that says oversized vehicles because I don't know that you can, I guess that would be the question if you could, I guess we have the authority to simply carve it out for buses, but I'm not sure. So, you know, we kind of accept the motion, oh, okay, it's this oversized vehicle, of course the bus is oversized. We move on, we saw the signage right and indicated number of feet. My only hesitation in directing anyone to change that is the cost involved. But if that is desired, I think that could be done. I don't know that it would require a motion. My only hesitation, again, is that there are expenses, so perhaps we should have such a motion if that is desired.
If you're going to be spending money, you should make a motion.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Do we have any idea about, estimate of said, are we talking about signage?
Yeah, and I would have to, I signed probably 4 or 5 different bills last month related to this pilot, and I would have to look at those bills again to tell you how
Les,
much
can
we
I
spent.
add something here, just so council's aware? There's a specific definition of a bus in the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code. And if you're splitting hairs here and you're going to take that away from oversized vehicles, you need to be aware that a bus is any vehicle that will transport more than 15 people, 15 or more people. So big van could park in your bus space if you're going to say this is for bus parking.
Okay, so it's literally 15.
I'll read it to you. Bus, a motor vehicle designed to transport 16 or more passengers, including the driver. I'm
Oh.
sorry, 16.
Well, that makes a big difference, right? That's your 15
A motor
passenger
vehicle other
vans,
than a
right?
taxi cab, limousine, or personal vehicle is defined in 66 PA 102 related definitions, designed to transport not more than 15 passengers, including the driver, and used for transportation of persons for compensation. That's the definition of a bus. I think you're further ahead to leave it as oversized vehicles. Just my opinion,
Understood.
but
I kind of thought at some point you'd come forward with a definition, so it worked out.
We're also testing at the slowest time
this
for
is-
buses, so it doesn't make
It's
sense.
not really an appropriate time for public comment.
But oversized vehicles is plural. It's an oversized vehicle is one bus. A vehicle towing a camper is not the same thing. It's two different things.
Okay, I guess what I would ask is that, Mr. Carr, if you'd like to phrase up a motion
Well,
that we do that,
And-
we have the
and-
discussion and we either go forward or we do not go forward.
I'd like to figure out how to phrase the motion.
Okay,
yeah,
let me,
because I don't want to see campers. That was not the intention. And
Understood.
while it may very well not be, the peak of tourist season for motor coaches and buses, we do have lots of tour buses that come throughout the year. But I don't want to see is what I hear people are calling about, or at least those two. That's not what it was intended for.
Okay, and another thing to know, now I'm looking at this motion to phrase this. This was adopted via resolution. So just understand that there would be cost incurred. Shouldn't be a lot, but probably 15 minutes of Harry's time to amend that. So just know that. So here's, I think, how your motion would go.
Well, is there any, does
It-
this need to be tabled till the next workshop meeting? and
What's
discuss it
really
all
appropriate
again,
would
or-
be that we could make a motion, get a second or not. If we get a second, we could have some discussion. At that point, if there was a desire to table it, could be tabled to a specific date to allow us to address it at a work session. Or it could simply be discussed and voted upon.
I wish to table, I want the other council members to be here for said discussion.
Okay, so we'll just have a motion this evening.
Let's see what happens.
We'll plan on discussing this.
Let's see what
on
happens, and let's see what the complaints come through from
the
our
28th,
constituents as well.
and-
But I
okay.
think that we should have other council members here.
Okay, so another aspect to this, I mean, this is a 90-day program, and we're probably 30 days into it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so at this point, Mr. Carr is not going to make a motion. We can have a discussion of this in 2 weeks, and if there is desire, at that time, we can add the motion to our September agenda if we're going to make an amendment. Okay. Questions and comments further for Ms. Fissel related to this or otherwise?
Is the pillow tax under parking department or the office of the manager?
We normally discuss that under the office of the manager.
That's what I thought. Something must be wrong with our,
This is the treasurer.
with our computer, because as I'm under parking, I'm now under office of the manager folder is in the wrong place. Anyway, no worries. I'll come back to that.
Okay, yeah, I don't see it under there, but I can tell you that sometimes when people are clicking through, I'll notice that people accidentally drag things, and that can happen. So that could have occurred. All right, any other questions or comments for Ms. Fissel? All right.
Yeah, I think that got dragged.
If not, we're going on to Mr. Harbaugh, Public Works.
Good evening. You all should have my report. A couple highlights on my report. Public Works crew started last Monday the 7th, doing line painting and thermoplast markings, highway markings. We'll be doing that this week as well, trying to get completed before the schools start, so we don't have issues with traffic and so forth like that. Street preservation contracts. JVI was contract number 2 to do the base repairs. They came in before July 4th and did the base repairs. They completed that, and contract number 1, Martin, with the chip sealing and the fog seal. Martin moved in the 9th and the 10th of last week and did the chip seal. We put signage out today. They are moving in on the 17th to do the fog seal to complete that process, and then they will be doing installing pavement markings that were originally there. They will do that later on, hopefully to have all this done by the end of August. That's all that I really have.
Any questions for Mr. Harbaugh?
Yes. So I know we're short staff. Again, I love our staff. I don't mean to sound pestering. I know we're short staffed, but I witnessed some line painting late at night at York and Stratton Street and at the further block over in front of Lee's Buffet. Can we perhaps, and I know you're short staffed, when that is happening at that hour, I mean, it's after midnight, and I applaud anybody that's working those hours. But when there's not enough light, when there is a whole bunch of cones and no one directing where they should go, and the guys are working hard down at the other end of the block in front of Lee's Buffet, and at York and Stratton, there's all these cones and sort of signage, but not a light, not a warning light, no one directing traffic, not a police car, nothing. It is dangerous. And I witnessed people that almost hit an oncoming car because they have no idea what to do. It was very weird. If there a way, I know we're short-staffed, but is there any way that maybe the Public Works and Police Department can work together on something like that? Or at least do we have a vehicle with a light on? It just looked really dangerous.
Are we setting patterns according to MUTCD?
Pretty much so, yes.
Yeah.
Except for the signage, because we're moving all the time. So the
Okay.
problem is with us staying at that intersection, we do that intersection, we do half that intersection, let the other half open so people can go around the cones.
Mhm.
And we do the opposite side, the same side, so we don't have to do an S-turn to get around them, okay? Doing that intersection, doing the next intersection, we get them done in about 15 minutes, so we're down by 4th Street before this street even opens up. So I don't have the manpower to have somebody at 6 different intersections to
No,
sit
I
there and direct
understand,
traffic.
I understand that. I'm just saying, why was it pitch black at York and Stratton with all of these cones and vehicles and no one directing traffic, vehicles not knowing what to do?
Well, I can't speak for pitch black because there's street lighting there at York
I mean,
Street.
it was done, and our street lights aren't great, but they were all the way down at Lee's Buffet. There was no one at York and Stratton. That's where the confusion was for the drivers.
I can't give you, I don't know how to tell you how we can do it. I mean,
I don't know
it
either.
would take
That's
us-
why I'm asking.
It would take us 20 people to do line painting in one night.
And that's why, I
We
mean,
don't have that.
I hesitate to get too involved because we deal with traffic. We had a pole hit the other day on York Street, there by the supply house, and you know, our police did a good job. But it's daylight. We didn't turn out a lot of people in the fire department. We had one police officer show up, and things were set up according to how they're supposed to be done by federal guidelines. And some folks are just going to defy logic, and when the people aren't, there just aren't enough people to manage it. I mean, you'd have to, like in the scenario we were in, I think total, you know, there were 2 officers. I saw Detective Weicker came down also, so there were 3. You know, total less than 10 people running this entire operation. And, you know, to really do it in a way that would be completely confusion-free would have involved a dozen or more traffic control points. So, I mean, especially when you're doing any kind of rolling closure. I mean, there are things you can add to cones. There are, like, the lights you can add at the top, but to be candid with you, not only are they not required, sometimes they're not even recommended, just because of it doesn't necessarily add clarity. I think your point is a valid one. I think that it's a difficult item to address. There are agencies that do this very efficiently, like the Turnpike Commission. Those agencies are very heavily staffed for that purpose, or they contract with people that are heavily staffed for that purpose. So yeah, I don't know that there's going to be a good solution.
I mean, we could try to contract it out, but that would be very, very costly.
Yeah, I mean, your choices are basically probably going to be to either try to contract with someone at night, which is probably not going to happen. So then you're talking about trying to do this during the daylight, which is a non-starter, in my opinion.
Right. And we don't own a truck that has any type of lighting capability for nighttime work.
Like a light tower.
Something.
Or something like that. No, PennDOT, you'll see sometimes they have the big like globe. It's like a half globe that illuminates out. But even those can be kind of problematic sometimes because they blind drivers.
How frequently do we do this? How frequently do we do the
Once
line
a
painting?
year.
Any collisions during line painting of record?
Not that I can think of.
There was-
And I would speak to Mr. Carr's point about the police helping. Yeah, happy to. But all it takes is one call of any
Right.
myriad of types, and there they
Everywhere
go.
else, yeah.
And then
Well-
Robbie's guys are off the road until we get back. So it's and if we get back. And the other thing with traffic control devices, you have to be careful. You don't want to put something out there that's not specified to be out there in TCD because you get yourself in trouble then. So, I mean, there's a publication that Robbie goes by. It's called Pub 213, Robbie,
Yes.
for work zone traffic control.
Yes.
And it's a guide, and that's what they use. But, I mean, it's one of those things where it's difficult.
I mean, the years that I've been here since 2005, we've never had an accident doing this at night. And that's why we do it at night, because traffic is really, really minimum.
What day of the week was this?
We do it all week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Harbaugh? Okay. If not, we'll go on to the engineer's report. Mr. Clayball is not with us this evening. You did note that Mr. Harbaugh mentioned JVI Group related to the street improvement projects.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Would you like me to elaborate on the motion you have there?
You certainly may.
Okay.
Thank you.
So JVI was the base repair contract. Their work has been completed. CS Davison wishes to hold 5% of that contract for items, punch list items that need to be done, which we normally do in a contract. They have some final seeding and grading to do behind the curves where we replace a couple curbs during that contract. That's why the 5% was being withheld from the contract, the final payment. The final contract was less than what was budgeted.
Okay. All right. Someone make that motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve application for payment number 1 to JVI Group Incorporated in the amount of $62,510 for items complete to date associated with contract number 2 of the 2023 Street Improvements Project as recommended by the Borough Engineer.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Are there any questions or comments related to the contract payment? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, seeing none. Move on to the operation and maintenance agreement for the stormwater facility. Someone make that motion, please.
I'll make a
then I explain.
motion
Yes.
to execute and deliver an operation and maintenance agreement with Ian and Ashley Miller for the stormwater management facilities associated with real property located at 4 Southwest Confederate Avenue.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. English, do you want to comment on this, or do you want me to handle that?
That's fine. It's operation maintenance agreement for their stormwater management and impervious surface. So they had a best management practice they needed to install and construct, and the O&M agreement is going to be their operational maintenance agreement for years for us to be able to inspect those facilities and give them punch lists for any maintenance items that may need to be attended to throughout its use.
Yeah, okay, and this did come through the Stormwater Authority, and actually much of the improvements that are being done there are basically they're eliminating and then replacing the square footage that's involved. It's not a significant addition.
And I think they're putting up a pool and a pool house.
Yeah, but they're taking down a garage and
Yes,
removing
yeah.
a part of a driveway, and it's more or less status quo in terms of the amount of impervious surface. Are there any questions related to the operation and maintenance? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That takes us on to the police department. Chief.
Evening. Seems like I've been talking a good bit tonight, so I'll try to keep this short. Yeah, my report, I did add at the end of it, I meant to do this last month, and with the plethora of things that happen the 1st of July every year, I didn't get to it, but there's a semi-mid-year summary in there for you of activity over time, things like that, for the first 7 months as opposed to the first 6 months. At the end of your reports, I will report just real briefly, talk about it more next month since it was actually in August, but National Night Out was an incredible success. I couldn't be more pleased. A couple things we'll tweak for next year, but we had a great turnout. Lots of folks, lots of people walking through, lots of kids. I mean, it was beyond my expectations. I would really like to commend Officer Wenrick for his thoroughness in what he did this year, right down to donations for SCAP, to having the idea for the fire company to do a fundraiser type thing. So it was just an incredibly good event in my mind, and I'm very pleased. A lot of community members, a lot of positive feedback.
Any questions or comments for the chief?
Can we make the dunking booth a fundraiser next year?
Sure, we can try.
All elected officials can be a part of it for an hour?
Absolutely.
Sounds like a fine idea to me.
Yeah.
Do the math on that.
Where's the money? It's for the kids.
We'll sign you up for a time slot.
No, Chief, I do want to. I mean, it was a great event. the people always respond well to the officers on the horses. The helicopter's in. It's just well coordinated and great event. So please send the compliments along.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments for the chief? All right, seeing none, that takes us on to the officer of the manager and treasurer. Ms. Stoll?
I don't have anything to add other than what's on the motions on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gable?
There is $2.1 million in the general fund, and consistent with the council's policy for use of ARPA funds, we now have $1.5 million in capital reserve, which will largely go to help fund our capital improvement plan that council adopted in 2021. I have nothing further to add.
Okay, you'll see we do have a few motions here under the section of the manager. Are there any questions for Mr. Gable or Ms. Stull that are not related to the motions? We have another opportunity here at the end. All right.
I'll wait till then.
Okay. All right. Then the bills and payrolls, please.
I'll make a motion to approve all bills and payrolls for the month as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Berger. Any questions or comments on the bills or payrolls this month? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next is the PML
I'll make a
appointment.
motion to appoint Borough Manager Charles Gable as the voting delegate at the Pennsylvania Municipal League Leadership Summit on October 5 through 8, 2023.
Second?
Okay, a motion and a second. Any questions or comments about the PML delegation? Okay, if not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now I'm going to ask for the next motion, and then we can, I will explain a bit of how this is done. So can someone blank the motion for Mr. Johnson?
I'll make a motion to appoint Andrew Johnson to the Gettysburg Historical Architecture Review Board in order to complete the term of Justin Harmon, which will expire in August 2026.
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. This would be to appoint Mr. Johnson to fill out the unfinished term of Mr. Harmon. So there were some questions which were valid about how this is done. The borough has not operated with a committee system for 8 years. In lieu of that, certain tasks are delegated amongst members of the council. The issue of dealing with our authorities, boards of commissions, which are quite numerous, is delegated to Mr. Moon and Mrs. Butterfield, who work as a team in order to address when we have vacancies. We maintain a file of applicants for various boards and commissions. Generally, when there are openings on individual boards and commissions that are single seats, we go to those applications. It is really a situation where I can understand the sentiment of, say, for instance, advertising these. You just want to be aware that there are
57
different appointees to these ABCs, so that would be certainly an advertisement each month, and generally to advertise just about anything in the Gettysburg Times, we're talking about, I want to say about $300 to $400 an advertisement, if I recollect about correctly. It could be a little less, but I'd have to go back and actually look at a bill to tell you. But it's just something that, candidly, when the bills come through, I sign them because there's no option. You must advertise in the newspaper of record. So that's a situation where we're obligated to do that.
It has to be a paid advertisement. I can't write a letter to the editor.
Correct.
I
I
was kidding.
I don't think Mr. Eastman would. I'm not even going to ask Mr. Boyer. I don't think he would go for that. So, for example, a similar circumstance, I would tell you, looking backwards a little bit, and I don't have the exact date, I'd have to look, but when Mr. Demko was appointed to the Recreation Authority, we had someone resign. I think Jake had resigned. Is that about correct?
Yeah.
So Jake was required to resign, Mr. Schindel, because he moved outside the borough. He served here, but he also served on the Recreation Authority for a number of years. So we looked into our file of applications, and Mr. Demko at that time really stuck out because he had a significant amount of experience working in that type of field. His background was in boys and girls clubs, in New Jersey before he relocated here. Similarly, when this was open, Mr. Johnson's application deals with references to his experience in construction and things of that nature. So I imagine that is why he rose to the top of that. But Mr. Moon, if you want to comment, or Mrs. Butterfield, feel free.
Sure. I would posit that Mrs. Butterfield and I do a pretty thorough job of reading all of the applications on file. We do have the application on our website. There are 10 ABCs that the borough is required to staff. It is 57 positions, I believe. It might be 55, I might be wrong. Many of them have alternates. Those are very hard to staff because nobody wants to volunteer their time to not participate, which is what an alternate often does. Even still, we have had, I think, great success finding those 55 or 57 people. But that doesn't mean that we always have a deep bench of folks who are willing to dedicate that kind of time. When Mrs. Butterfield and I started doing this 3 years ago together, and we are a bipartisan group, we collectively determined that waiting for volunteers was not enough, that we needed to recruit from the community as well. So I think that was a pertinent question. Do we sometimes volunteer? Do we approach people? We absolutely do. We think recruitment is a powerful way of getting people involved in civic engagement. In this particular case, the application came to us organically, and we did have a few applications on file, which I think definitely predated the pandemic. They're at least 4 to 5 years old. One, the phone numbers were no longer valid. One other person, had already been asked twice and had declined twice, so we didn't call them a third time. And we had an application that was from a person who was enthusiastic about it, who has a background in it professionally, both historic preservation and construction. And it's been a while since we've had somebody on HARB who does have a background in construction. Mrs. Butterfield and I, as we always do for these appointments, met with him for about 90 minutes and asked him questions about his experience, and also detailed what council feels the priorities of each ABC is, and asked him whether he could work in those parameters. He agreed that he could, and my recollection is that she and I both agreed he would be an excellent addition to the body. You're welcome.
Okay. Any questions or comments related?
I'll just comment, and again, I'm not hassling the staff. Please don't write that in the paper, Jim. But yes, I do agree, to a point, our website could use some work. And to a point, yes, if there's some names on there that are people that are no longer serving or volunteering or whatever, we will get that fixed, so that it doesn't appear to the public that we have a full commission or authority or board when we don't. But I do recall, I don't remember what month, but I do recall Mr. Moon saying more than once at either a workshop meeting or a business meeting since I've been in this seat, which is a little under 2 years, he has said that we're constantly looking for volunteers for any of our ABCs, and to please check that out on the website and find out which, check out the application and send it in for anything that you might be of interest in, so that we can put it on the file, so that when a spot does open up, we can look at that file. So, but yes, let's fix the website. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If you're interested in serving on the Civil Service Commission, get your application in before May of 25. So my seat will be vacant. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Any questions? I believe, Mr. Carr, you had a question.
Yeah, so just a question back to the pillar tax, and which was also brought up at comment at the beginning. I appreciate the report, the pillar tax report, that is dollar figures. Is there a way that either we could request perhaps from Destination Gettysburg
Charles wishes Patty was here right now.
Right. That's okay.
So intensely.
Perhaps we'll talk about this. I know we'll talk about this more. I'd like to know the number, the number of heads and beds, the number of actual room nights.
You're gonna have to get that from Destination
Okay.
Gettysburg.
So when they give us a check, they're just giving us a check. There's no report with it?
No.
Interesting. Let it be
Well,
on record.
So their numbers are complicated too, because
Oh, I get it.
it's not just what's reported through the hotels on a monthly basis, but they also are receiving lump sum payments that are not itemized from organizations like Airbnb and Vrbo. So the way the law in Pennsylvania is structured, those companies will make a payment to the county as a lump sum with no itemization whatsoever. And they might not even necessarily be required to make it a monthly report. I don't know the particulars on that. So the numbers might not even be accurate.
Right.
It is,
It's a long-standing issue of contention.
it's a very,
sure.
it's a shockingly small number
And
we
it's
receive.
not just Destination Gettysburg. This is an issue of contention between the borough, Destination Gettysburg, and the county.
Yeah, and the way, and Patty's research into this and John's research into this, the way the law is structured for our pillow tax and our tourism bureau in Adams County is different from any other county in the state. And the way the math works out is does not favor Gettysburg.
No, sure, there's that, but also just looking at the report, the report is a dollar figure by each month. It would be great to, and while I, agreed, it's a small amount considering how much pillow tax the county gets.
What I'm saying
but-
is we'll never actually have that accurate
But
number
it's-
because the Vrbo and Airbnb
Right.
numbers don't exist.
But it's also a question of, are these numbers this higher because some room rates are higher, which I believe are?
Sure.
Or are we indeed getting more and more visitors than we've ever had before?
I think it's a little bit of both, right?
I've had to
Room
do
rates are higher, and it is a 5% tax on the room rate.
Right.
But we also know from our parking information and from other indicators that numbers are up.
Yeah.
You raise a very valid point because people look at that and they say, oh, it's increasing.
Right.
Candidly, we've always used parking as a better dipstick just because we know where the numbers come from. We could extrapolate a little bit about the breakdown, but after the county takes its administration fee, what's left after that is then split 75, and I believe 12 and a half, 12 and a half.
What it works out to is for every $100 in lodging spent in Adams County, $5 is collected, and the municipalities that have lodgings, so that is, and also have
And
a
a police
full-time
department.
police department.
Full-time police department.
So that's Gettysburg, Cumberland, Carroll Valley. I think there's one more. All of those municipalities end up splitting 62 cents of those $5.
Yeah, we get a portion of that 12.5%.
Right.
not
And I
the
think it's
entirety of
important
it.
for the public to know that. And I'm sure it's been discussed multiple times in this room. And I know, there's parking and then there's heads and beds, which are two different, there's a lot of tourists that come and pay for parking, but they don't stay the night.
Sure. Sure.
So just to add a little more color to this conversation, while we don't know the number of heads and beds, we do know, and it's right here on the screen, we are surpassing year-to-date any previous year in pillow tax going back to 2014.
Which could be because they've raised their rates, which then raises our percentage. Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we know when we increase parking rates or not.
I mean, I looked at
Make a
room
mistake.
rates when friends come into town, and I don't think it's out of norm pre-pandemic at this point, but I could be wrong.
And Mr. Moon kind of alluded to it. I mean, the other part to remember is that if we were under the model, I don't know for certain, but I would guess that Philadelphia, the city county of Philadelphia and Allegheny County have their own setups as well. But I know that we, other than those two counties, we are unique. And if we were not unique, we would get nothing. That is the general model. The general model in the Commonwealth is that you have a county tourism and visitor bureau that's operated by the county government. they get 100% of the funds.
Yep.
This county is set up differently. A lot of that goes back to Terry Punt.
Who was it?
Terry Punt was our state senator at the time. He advocated for that legislation, and we have a different setup, including how the county tourism agency exists, which is different because, right, for example, they do not answer to the county commissioners, which is unique. All right, any other questions or comments for the manager?
A comment, the conundrum, the uptick in the number of visitors equals an uptick in the number of buses, leading back to a previous discussion.
Yeah, and some of these things, you have to be careful about how much you try to calculate based on any data set.
Right.
Because at some point, you're just sort of extrapolating on things, and it's difficult. All right, anything else? Okay, we'll go into our liaison reports. So on the Sellers.
She's not here
Did
tonight.
not. Okay, you had the Main Street report in your folder for the month. Were there any questions, or do you want to make any comments specific? I know that there is movement forward with the Elm Street program. She's sort of helping foster some of that, and of course with the various proposals that are going on in the federal government to try to get assistance here to the borough.
Yes, we needed to get a $25,000 match. We got it.
Good.
So
Very good.
Jill has, I think, already sent the application and the preliminary application into Pennsylvania downtown.
Yeah, and a lot of the things in her report are, a lot of these things were just kind of in this hold and wait in terms of what specifically the federal government does, but some of those things that are closer can be a little more easily achieved.
Public comment, I'll tell you more.
Okay. The Recreation Authority, Mr. Carr.
I don't have anything right now.
The Municipal Authority, Mr. Berger.
Okey doke. Up on Hers Ridge, booster station options are being revisited, as well as extending water mains, which will provide more water pressure up on the ridge. The Andrews Well, Buchhorn is finalizing the well pump and treatment design and preparing the public water supply permit application to DEP. Up on Cemetery Hill, we approved the bid. The lowest bid was C.E. Williams. That project's going to be moving forward. With the office building on Middle Street, there's a pre-construction meeting on Monday, and demolition might start next week. The Interceptor, the sewer, still working on 2 easements. PennDOT and stream crossing permits are under review, and railroad and DEP permits will be submitted at the end of July.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Berger?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what building is going to be demolished? Something on Middle
The
Street?
424 Middle Street. I don't think they're going to demolish. There's just going to be some little bit of
like some,
demolition.
yeah,
Yeah, moving it up on the.
You're talking about internal work.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's some reformatting
That's
of how
what.
the
That's
layout.
That's how Mr. Geis termed it today. So probably was the
The layout of
wrong
that
word.
space,
Right.
if you were never in there, might not match what they need.
Right.
Got it. Thank you, sorry.
No problem. The bid, Mrs. Butterfield.
Yes, there was a lot of conversation about the Christmas festival. Steinware, it's important to Steinware, the festival is, and they are active participants. Main Street is looking toward perhaps a small increase in donations from those organizations that give to the festival, so that some of the events and participants, such as the live reindeer, the hours could be extended, the very popular items. Jill did a very thorough and good report on that. They are looking toward adding a wreath contest for businesses this Christmas festival, with which Steinware would participate. It would be a contest for which you would vote with a quarter or $1, and there would be a winner. The movies, she reported, were a big success, both of them. I think both of them were sold out for the opening. Is that right, Matt?
For the anniversary of the Gettysburg movie.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
in
was
her report,
late.
she noted that was sold out.
The Saturday is sold out. There are still tickets for Friday
So
and Sunday.
very, very popular. And Jackie White reported on the Eisenhower Society and their successful picnic. Ms. White has been an active participant in the Eisenhower Society since it was founded, and she continues to be so, and we appreciate that.
Questions for Mrs. Butterfield? Mayor Freeling, the County Boroughs Association.
Nothing to report.
Okay, back to Mrs. Butterfield for the COG.
Yes, as with most organizations, COG is actively seeking more involvement from the school systems. It has been my experience in attending Upper Adams and Bermudian Springs are very faithful participants in COG, and they are hoping to expand that and encourage other systems to take a more active role. As I have mentioned, I am a member of the collaboration subcommittee, and we're studying the need for cybersecurity training within the county. That survey continues. I was tasked with asking a county commissioner and a borough manager to submit 3 names of people who might put outside the county eyes on our proposed survey, looking at the length, the clarity, the comprehensive nature of the questions, and so that is in process now.
Okay. Ms. Lawson is not with us this evening. Do you want to continue with ACTPO?
Okay, at ACTPO, I reported to them on the pending READY project. It will forever be the READY project in my mind, focusing on the transit system and the moving of the transit building. I was pleased to be able to say, when they questioned that, why move it, that a former board member had reported, thank you, Darlene, that from the very beginning that had been part of the plan, that it was not in a permanent location, and that was very helpful for me to know and to be able to report that to them. They asked for a traffic study for the project's effect on Stratton and Carlisle, and I said I would pass that on, and am doing so, passing it on.
All right, questions for Mrs. Butterfield? All right, and Carly's not here this evening, but I assume that's something that goes on during the land development process.
Phase, correct.
Yeah. Okay, that takes us to overdose awareness. Mr. Moon?
The task force met last month. We had sort of an organizational meeting where we discussed what the mission of the task force is moving forward, and we will meet again tomorrow. This month, on the 31st, is the 5th Annual International Overdose Awareness Day Memorial Walk. If folks are inclined, please feel free to join us on the 31st. We'll meet at 6 p.m. in front of the courthouse, and we will walk to the Fireman's Pavilion at the Rec Park, stopping on the way at Mercy House and Collaborating for Youth. If anyone out there has a loved one they would like to add to the memorial, someone they lost to overdose, please feel free to reach out to me. I can put you in contact with the people who can facilitate that.
Okay. Trail feasibility. Mr. Berger. Recycling. Mrs. Butterfield.
I attended the PROP conference, Professional Recyclers of Pennsylvania. The theme of the conference was this year repurposing, one of the arms of the recycle, repurpose, reuse theories of DEP. The very first presentation at the conference was on demolition of property and repurposing the materials resulting from that. So I excitedly took careful notes and ran to Main Street to point that out about our Brown House, our visitor center demolition. And they were, as usual, many steps ahead of me. They'd already considered that. They've spoken with people about recycling it. They're always jumping ahead. It was nice to have the conference here in Gettysburg at the Wyndham, because I was able to ziggy back into town for the HARB meeting which interested me in what they were covering that particular evening, and then staying overnight and attending the early morning COG meeting the next day. So let's get some more conferences here in Gettysburg. Makes it easy and convenient.
Okay, you have the fire department report in your folder. There's nothing there from EMS this month. Elected officials' comments.
I have
I'm
one
sorry.
thing more.
Sorry.
The At Home in Adams County meeting, they focused very heavily on public transportation. That's part of the definition of affordable housing is its proximity to public transportation. And this handout that I gave to all of you is what they're focusing on now. Walk, bike, and bus, encouraging people to do so in downtown Gettysburg, walk it, bike it, but don't necessarily drive it. So that's the purpose of this.
Okay. Elected officials' comments. Madam Mayor?
Yes, I have been asked by the Lancaster Historical Society to become involved. They're doing a Thaddeus Stevens Museum there. It's where Thaddeus Stevens lived. They're opening up something, but it's not going to be actually a museum. It's going to be like a center for democracy because of everything Thaddeus Stevens did, like the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. So I'll be working with them, and they wanted to include Gettysburg because Thaddeus Stevens lived here many years, and his law practice was here. And as everybody knows, that they dedicated to Thaddeus Stevens. So I went to involve Gettysburg. I also involved Ross Hedrick, who is the president. He was involved, but he and I are working together. I was in Lancaster this past Sunday, just visiting sites and talking to people about Thaddeus Stevens. I did a podcast highlighting Gettysburg for Destination Gettysburg, just talking about things to do here and why Gettysburg is so interesting. And I found out from them, and bookings.com named Gettysburg #1 for hospitality out of all sites. And I was just very proud of that. So we talked about that. And I could go on about other things, but they're my highlights. So if you have any questions, call me, stop by, see me. But I was just, I think, #1. Well, you didn't know that one. Anyway, but yes, I thought that. Hey, I'm a cheerleader. I'm a cheerleader for Gettysburg. But anyway, I thought that was really good.
Mr. Carr.
And, wait, one
okay.
other thing.
Sorry.
For your prod conference, I welcome people to Gettysburg. So I just go around, that's part of my duties, I go around to different things, welcome people to Gettysburg, tell them what to do, and talk up the town and our police force. Thank you.
Chief, on Saturday evening, I called and I want to again thank Officer Clunk. Every single time I have any interaction with him about an issue, is absolutely professional, calm, cool, and collected, and takes care of it, even with anybody, even if it was someone, I've noticed, even when he's dealing with someone that might be pushing some buttons of others, he is calm, cool, and collected and professional. But I want to hear from you, because the public needs to know what I'm all about. If anybody knows me, they know I'm all about freedom of speech. I get that. But when you have an amplified system for your standing on the square of freedom of speech that is disrupting businesses that are operating during their business hours, and they can be heard a block away inside the business, inside the building, would you say that's a little too loud, or is that legal? They have no permit, mind you, it's freedom of speech, but it is an amplified system on the square.
Well,
it is not the parklet. It
your
is not
words-
the band. That's what I didn't hear.
Your
They were so
ordinance-
loud, they were louder than the band that was on the square Saturday night.
Well, your ordinance doesn't preclude that. Does not preclude amplification, except after, is it 11 or midnight?
Mhm.
The only exception is New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
And so, which means that you would have to go back under to the disorderly conduct sections of the crimes code.
Mhm.
And there is one there that is unreasonable noise is a subsection for disorderly conduct. So it could fall under that, but it's very subjective.
Mhm.
So, and generally you have to take into account things like time of day. If you can hear that inside a business a block away with the door shut,
Yes.
that may have risen to the level of disorderly conduct. And again, I must say may have.
Right.
And it would, again, time of day is a big factor, because the way we would generally judge like a loud music complaint at an apartment is we'll stand outside and wait for cars to go by or trucks.
Right.
And if the ambient noise drowns out the music, it's really not disorderly. So it's very subjective, and there's a lot of factors, and I can't give you a definitive answer, but it can be looked at under disorderly conduct, unreasonable noise.
And also, didn't you tell me it's hard to measure the decibels of
Well,
what?
decibels, we don't have anything that talks about decibels, not in the ordinance, nor does disorderly conduct have it. The only place where it exists now is under the liquor code, so there has to be liquor involved.
That
And then-
measurement would be different depending how close to the source you were. So
Right.
if
Well,
you're
and
measuring
there's-
from 15 feet versus 70 feet, you'll get a
Yes,
different
and
measurement.
the whatever the name of the decibel meter is, it's not a decibel meter. I can't think of the name of it, it's off the top of my head. Very difficult standards to deal with when you're talking about decibels. As Mr. Moon says, how far away? Where do you stand? Is the meter calibrated? Is it working? Do you know how to use it? Does somebody have training in using it? So the amplified voices, listening to your description, could have very easily risen to the level of disorderly conduct. But without being there, I can't give you a professional opinion one way or the other. But there are a lot of variables, we try. An arrest isn't a solution.
Right.
Arrest could be part of a solution, but it's never a solution
Right.
in and of itself. So, we look at those things. If the officers can talk to that person and say, hey, this is a little loud, people are complaining, can you please turn it down?
Mhm.
And then they comply, then it's,
Right.
we've done our thing because we've got it down. So, it's situational, and I know that's not the best explanation,
Right.
but that's basically it. It's situational, and it depends on a lot of variables.
No, so you answered my question. So I'm encouraging the public, when you hear something that you feel is so loud and obnoxious that is disturbing what you consider to be your peace, such as trying to have a dinner outside or inside a restaurant downtown, and it's so disturbing that it's disturbing your meal, or you're operating your business, be it during the day at a business meeting or be it at night inside a theater while a performance is going on a block away, and it's disturbing that business from their operating, you need to please call the non-emergency number, which is 717-334-8101. Dispatch loves me because I call all the time.
Let me say something even on top of
But
what
it
you're saying.
really doesn't need to just be me, because I walked to that block and people were like having dinner and they were complaining about it. I was like, why is no one else calling and complaining?
I would envision, or I would encourage anyone to call the police if they think it's a police matter. Because the worst thing that's going to happen is the police are going to come, we're going to evaluate it, and we're going to say, there's really nothing we can do about this, even though that I'd never like to say that. So what I'm trying to say is I would much rather be there and not be needed than not be there and be needed.
Right.
If you're following the way that I'm talking. And what I want to say one more thing with the disorderly conduct, reasonable noise. When you're talking about disorderly conduct, the section says you engage in these things to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm. And the big thing there is public. Public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof. So you have to have that public element as well. So for what it's worth.
Yeah.
But please, call the police if you think you need us. Please.
Because 9
Please,
times
please,
out of
please.
10, they'll show up. They'll say, "Hey, you need to turn those down,"
Yes,
and they
exactly,
will, or
yes.
they'll get mad and leave.
Yeah.
And then problem solved. But don't let it go on. It went on for 2 hours before I called because I didn't realize that it had already been going on. Thank you, though.
You're welcome.
Butterfield? Any further? Mr. Moon? Berger? All right, that'll take us to our second public comment session. Remember, please use the podium, give your name and address, and limit yourself to 5 minutes. Public comment, Ms. Brown.
Hi, I'm Darlene Brown, and I live at 355 West High Street. I just wanted to give you an update. 6 weeks ago, at the meeting before this, I announced that we were trying to reestablish the Elm Street program. PA Downtown met with us and said they had a $25,000 grant to update our old plan, which they use as an example throughout Pennsylvania. They also told us we had to raise $25,000 to match the $25,000 that they were going to give us by August 31st. We've accomplished that. We've got the $25,000 pledged, plus a little bit extra money for a slush fund. So before the other Elm Street, the borough applied for it for us. This time, I was hoping Jill would be here to explain. Jill is applying through Main Street. Okay, the preliminary application has been put in, and we will be moving forward. I just want to say that, Chief, before, we had a very strong youth group down there. They call themselves the Brick Squad, and they were honored through Pennsylvania Downtown, through the state of Pennsylvania. We're hoping to establish that again. I'm trying to get Manny from Foursquare Church, the youth leader, to come to our meetings. I just called today. So I'm hoping that, and I called Andrew from the Historic Society and hope that he'll be part of it. We meet Thursday at 1 o'clock here in the Borough Building, and everybody's invited to listen to it. We're very excited about this initiative. That's my update.
Thank you. Public comment. All right, seeing no, I'm sorry. Yes.
Carrie Greenwald. I live at 256 Baltimore Street. I have rented apartments in town since 2010. 3 in total, and now live on Baltimore Street. So mainly up and down Chambersburg and York Streets. I wanted to comment about this test program going on as far as oversized or bus parking in town. Ironically, I lived at 156 York Street prior to moving, and so that's where one of the other oversized spaces is. In theory, it seems like a great idea. I've worked in the hospitality industry for most of the 13 years I've lived here in town. However, what we have always encouraged buses to do is park at the fire hall or park at the former visitor center parking lot, and that has worked very well. As someone who gives food tours currently through town, traffic is already challenging, and to be adding to that buses that are now navigating these oversized parking spaces, it just creates an additional issue as far as people walking on the sidewalks, what have you. I think that also, and I know this is several years too late because it's already long past and been implemented, but as someone who has lived at many apartments in town, when we instituted the parking charges on Sundays and putting them to 1 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the evening, it's wonderful for those that attend church to still be able to have free parking. It's very challenging for people who live in apartments who don't necessarily have space beyond their own space at that apartment, or who have to park at the parking garage or several blocks away, what have you, to be able to get to their apartment, to be able to have friends or family over without them having to pay the meters. And not every person who rents an apartment in town can afford to be covering the cost of friends or family to be coming, to visit them. So it adds another challenge. So if you're living in one of these apartments, which there are many downtown, and you're hoping to be able to unload your groceries, unload your laundry, what have you, and now you're suddenly dealing with buses that are taking up 3 parking spaces in front of rental units that can park there at any point in time up until 2 o'clock in the morning, it's incredibly disruptive. We already live on in areas where it is very busy because of traffic to begin with. And so it just adds one more layer of frustration. And not everyone, frankly, can afford to, just move out of town to one of these oh so affordable, places in the community. A lot of people live here, they work downtown, they walk to, where it is that they, are working at, and suddenly it's just becoming yet another layer of challenge for people that are already struggling in various ways financially. So I hope that you take that into consideration as well. I mean, ironically, one thing that kind of doesn't bother me, I never see campers trying to park in town. I'm really surprised that at least 2 of them have called asking for that. Just witnessing them attempting to navigate our intersections is cause for great amusement. So the idea that any of them would want to be parking downtown versus just leaving their camper in the place where they're camped to take their truck in town instead makes far more sense to me. And again, why can't they be directed to, the already designated areas of the fire hall and, behind the schools during the summer, or at, the visitor center lot? I mean, that's why we have public transportation. Why aren't we pushing then instead for them to be taking advantage of the transit center? I mean, when we hopefully choose to do a traffic study as far as this new community coming in at Stratton Street, it would be nice to take into account what the traffic is overall in this area before we start allowing buses and doing a survey when it's the least busy time in the summer for buses. Makes no sense. Thank you.
Okay. Public comment. All right, seeing no additional public comment, we are going to adjourn to executive session.